Download Galatea to get access to hundreds of romance books and audiobooks. Link in the description. Erotic content ahead. Chapter 1. Dear readers, this is an erotic story featuring many steamy situations and themes. Please use discretion while reading. Penny. My father always told me I was blessed with Artemis's gift. But to me, it felt like a curse that forced me to live among wolves as a human. Forever an unmated virgin, cast aside and alone. As my friends found their mates and waltzed off into the sunset, I resigned myself to my fate. And then I met him, the Lichen King, my greatest enemy. Yet as much as we loathed one another, we were drawn together, as if by Artemis herself. I guess the moon goddess has a twisted sense of humor, and I guess I will soon be a virgin no more. I was in the forest to draw the wildflowers in bloom. I loved to draw. It was my passion. It was also a means to express my feelings and enjoy the quiet. I wasn't an introvert per se, but I liked to be on my own. I focused on the petals' different shades. The sun was shining brightly on the flowers, casting different shades of blue. Thankfully, I had brought everything I needed to do them justice. I took out my pencils and my crayons and got to work. I was so absorbed in my sketch that I almost didn't hear the sound of paws on the forest floor. A wolf came behind me, and I smiled at him. It was a sandy blonde wolf that I recognized as my best friend, Kyle. We'd grown up together in the pack, even if I was only human. The alpha of the pack had adopted me when I was just a baby and raised me like one of them because, according to him, I was blessed by Lady Artemis. Yes, the goddess of the hunt herself. I had a stag head looking toward a crescent moon tattooed on my arm, and according to my father, it was a blessing from the goddess. Thanks to this mark, I could mind link and call all lycanthropes to me, even those who weren't wolves. How did I know that it worked? Well, let's say that as a baby, I hadn't had full control of it, and some other lycanthropes would find themselves drawn to me. That had occasioned many troubles for the Border Patrol, but they'd forgiven me, mostly. What is it, Kyle? I asked the wolf behind me, but I was still sketching. Alpha Richard is asking for you. He has some big news. I turned my light green eyes to his yellow ones. This was unexpected. What did my dad want? What kind of news? I asked, curious. He made me promise not to tell. Come on, hop on my back, we'll be faster. Fine, but you know I don't like it, I said, frowning. He chuckle-growled and lowered the front of his body so I could jump on his back. I hated to climb on their backs because it was harder to ride a wolf than a horse. They weren't as well balanced. I held his neck for dear life as he ran through the woods. I trusted Kyle with my life. But that didn't mean that I wasn't scared. I'd ridden on his back as a child, and my father had always said that I should stop doing it because it was such an intimate gesture. But Kyle had no mate for now and didn't care. As for me, I'd probably never have a mate, even if my father was persuaded otherwise. He'd said that my mark was proof of the goddess choosing me for some big purpose. Right. As if. Who would want a human as a mate? Kyle stopped in front of our pack house. It was a huge house where the wolves could live. You could also find the offices of the leaders as well as a huge kitchen where we could all eat together if we wanted to. I got down from Kyle's back to enter the house. My stepbrother and future alpha, Jacob, greeted me at the door. He was the copy of our father, and he always treated me like his real sister, even if we weren't blood related. He was tall at about 6'1", and his chestnut brown hair, the same color as mine, was in a skater cut. He was muscular because he trained a lot, and he had all the she-wolves at his feet. He wasn't mated yet either, so that gave them hope. Kyle smiled at my brother as he too entered the house and put a hand on my shoulder, earning himself a glare from Jacob. He hated it when Kyle touched me, because he was very protective of me. He landed his hazel eyes on me as I walked to him and smiled a loving smile. Penny, come on, Father is expecting us. Right, Jake. Do you know what he wants? Not really, no. Great. He laughed and gave me one of his killer smiles. The one that had all the unmated she-wolves of the pack swooning. "You know he hates it when you're sarcastic," he said. "He knows that I can't help it." I shrugged. "Right?" he chuckled. We entered the Alpha's office, and there stood an older version of Jacob. My father was behind his wooden desk, and I instantly felt happy. I always felt safe and good when he was around. Such was the power of the Alpha. Alpha Richard lifted his hazel eyes and smiled. He straightened up in his chair before motioning for us to sit down. We did, and he looked between us. "Alpha King Sirius will be visiting us shortly." I widened my eyes, and so did Jake next to me. The Alpha King of the werewolves was actually a lichen. They were bigger and stronger wolves with a form of half-beast, half-man that the werewolves didn't have. I knew that the Alpha King hated humans and saw it as a bad sign that my father had taken me in, so the news made me uncomfortable for a moment. "Don't worry, Penelope. He's not coming because of you," my father said reassuringly. "There's been some problem with the vampires around here, and that's why I asked for his help." "Should I stay away while he's here?" I asked, uncertain. "Go to college as usual and don't change your plans. You're my daughter, and this pack is your home." I smiled at him, and he smiled back. I knew he always had my back, but I'd still try to stay well away from the king. That would be best for everyone. A week passed before the day of his arrival, and I was walking home from college. I was alone tonight because Kyle was already home to greet the king. My father had organized a party for him, his beta, and some members of the royal pack. I hoped they'd like it. I was walking through the woods as I neared our territory. I could feel the leaves crunch under my feet. I liked that sound. I liked walking in the forest. Being raised by werewolves was definitely a plus for me. I hummed to myself as I passed the trees. The moon was casting enough light so I could see my path. The stars were also out, and that almost made me want to draw the scenery. But I was expected home, and I couldn't delay more. I was almost there when I felt a presence behind my back. Who could that be? I strained my ears to hear a sound, but I couldn't hear a thing. It was no wolf because they'd always make their presence known to me, since I couldn't use my sense of smell like them. I used Artemis's mark to try and feel them through the mind link. But instead of the warm, fuzzy feeling I got when I mind-linked Jacob or Kyle, my mark turned icy cold. Whatever was following me was no wolf. I felt panic surge through me, and I hastened my pace. The border was marked by a sycamore, and I just had to pass it to be safe. I could use my power to call for help, but I didn't want to do that unless I knew I was in danger. I wanted to run, but that could incite my stalker to rush me. I breathed out until the presence was right behind me. My mark turned blinding cold. I was too scared, so I shot my power out and hoped Jake would hear me. Just then, icy cold hands closed around my throat. The creature turned me to face him, and I could see his eyes. He had no pupils. He was a vampire. He leered at me, showing pointed white teeth. "What's a human like you doing here? Don't you know that the big bad wolves live just right there?" He scrutinized my face and laughed as he recognized me. The sound was chilling me to the bone. "Oh, I recognize you, bloodbag. You're Alpha Richard's daughter, the little human he took in because she was abandoned in the woods. Well, I'm going to have some fun with you." I wanted to cry, but I wouldn't give him the satisfaction. I tried to kick him, but that only made him chuckle. He brought my neck to his fangs. I closed my eyes. This was the end. And then something happened I had never experienced before. A searing, white-hot warmth exploded across my mark. At the same time, I heard a mighty roar. The vampire looked behind me, and his eyes bulged. He dropped me on the spot, and I held my throbbing arm. The moment I was on the ground, I looked up to see the tallest dark gray wolf I had ever seen. He was baring his fangs at the vampire and growling menacingly. As he growled, I felt my mark burn hotter. "What the vampire said. The wolf jumped between us and stood protectively in front of me. The vampire made a run for it, but the wolf didn't give chase. Instead, he turned his gaze to me, his teeth still bared. I rubbed my sore mark as I looked up into his beautiful golden eyes, which had a purple halo in them. There was something about this wolf. My mark was still throbbing. It was like the warmth I felt in the mind link to Kyle or Jacob, but 1,000 times more powerful. It hurt. I tried to imagine what his human form looked like. I pictured ripped muscles and a perfect jawline, alpha material through and through. I felt pressure and wetness in my core. Oh my gods, was I turned on? Download Galatea to get access to hundreds of romance books and audiobooks. Link in the description.
Serious. Chapter 2. Alpha Richard had once again outdone himself with this party. I hated parties, actually. I hated seeing too many people in a confined place, especially fawning she-wolves who thought I'd take them as my queen. They disgusted me. Lycans could only mate their true mates. The only small relief I had was that everyone present was a werewolf, that I could withstand. Richard's human daughter wasn't here, and for that, I was grateful. I hated humans the most. Among all other creatures, I thought humans were the lowest. It was beyond me why he hadn't killed that thing when she was just a baby. I remembered him telling me when he'd taken her in that she was blessed by Lady Artemis. That didn't matter to me, really. He should have eaten her. It was what the first Lycan, Fenrir, did to puny humans. I agreed that we didn't need them. They were weak and a disgrace to the gods. I was drinking from my glass in a corner, looking at the party unfold when I felt it come surging through the mind link, an irresistible call. I didn't know whether it was a sound or a warmth or a taste or a feeling. Maybe it was all of them together. It even called my name. No way, I thought to myself. Who dared call me? By my name, no less. I'd make that wolf regret it. I was a Lycan and the king. I wouldn't take orders from werewolves. I was unable to resist that call, and my wolf wanted to go anyway. He loved the sound. It was feminine and enticing. What could call a Lycan like that? I'd thought only the moon goddess could have such a power over us. Was it the human blessed by the goddess? I needed to know to give her a piece of my mind. Jacob, Alpha Richard's firstborn, passed me by, and he seemed in a hurry. Did he hear it too? I stopped him, and he looked at me quizzically. I supposed it would be shocking for me to stop him like that. Shit, I couldn't let him go before me anyway. My king? He said. I'll go, I answered matter-of-factly. He seemed surprised, but I didn't let him say anything else. I bolted out and shifted to my powerful dark gray wolf. I didn't want to take on my half-form. I was faster as a full wolf. I ran to the source of the calling power. I was running between the trees as if hell was behind me. I'd never run so fast in my entire life. That power was pulling me in, and I had to know what it was. I needed to know. When I finally found the source, I saw a beautiful girl being held by the throat by a vampire. He was about to bite her, over my dead body. I growled at the vampire, and his eyes looked like saucers. He released the girl, and I immediately jumped in front of her to protect her. Why do I want to protect her? Why is it important? The vampire fled, but I didn't bother to give chase. He was only small fry, and the girl behind me was more important. The fuck? Why should a human be important? I turned around to look at the girl instead. She was clutching her throat and trying to breathe. I felt concern, and another feeling I'd never thought I'd feel again surged. I buried it immediately and growled at her. How dare she? She turned her gaze to me and swallowed hard. Yes, fear me, little worm. That was better. I'm sorry, Your Highness. I was supposed to call my brother, she said with difficulty. Her throat was still red. I fought my wolf because he wanted to lick her throat to make it all better. Like hell you will, I told him. Does she think I'm her pet or something? I spit. She shook her head and scrambled to her feet. Did she hear me? How was that even possible? I hadn't known humans could do that. Was it the blessing? Was her blessing allowing her to hear us? No, never. It's just my ability. I truly didn't mean to call for you. I'm sorry, Your Majesty. Yes, I can hear you just fine. That's also part of my ability, she said, answering my silent questions. I didn't like that one bit, so I jumped on her and pulled her back onto the ground where she belonged. I snapped my jaw before her face to let her know that I meant business, but she wasn't scared. She only offered me a blank face as she tried to even her breathing. That was actually bold. I saw the mark on her arm as my eyes scanned her, and it was the crest of the Lady of the Hunt. It was undeniable. Why this tiny creature, though? Why did the lady choose her as a huntress? I felt the tingles the second I touched her. There was no burying my feelings anymore. They surged and crawled in my entire body, making me warm all over and sending blood coursing to my manhood. Fuck. I knew what those feelings meant. She looked at me, dumbfounded, and I growled lowly, even if my wolf was snarling at me for being rough with her. Never call me like that again, I drawled. She frowned at me and had the audacity to look me in the eyes. She was too cunning, that one. I seriously wanted to make her submit right now, but her next words shocked me more than her actions. I'll remember that, Your Highness. Get off me so I can disappear from your regal sight. That almost made me chuckle. She was daring, that little one. I felt pride swell in my heart, but I crushed it right away. No way I'd let her have a hold on my emotions. She already had a hold on my body. I felt the warmth bubbling in my stomach. More than warmth, heat, and pressure. This couldn't be happening. Another set of paws came our way, and it was the deep chocolate-brown wolf of Jacob. I'd recognize that wolf anywhere. He was as much a copy of his father as a wolf as he was as a human. He lowered his snout in respect and looked at his sister, who was still quiet underneath me. Please, Your Highness. She truly aimed for me. Please don't punish her, he said through the mind link. Normally, the mind link only worked for wolves of the same pack, but since I was king, I was a part of all the werewolves' packs on Earth. I growled again, but took a step back so she could stand up. I locked my gaze on her as soon as she was on her feet. The heat was building inside me. It was sexual, but it was so much more. I wanted it to stop. Never show yourself to me again, I said with a growl. Duly noted, she snorted. She made a mocking bow and turned to her brother. He let her climb on his back, and I almost ran to them to stop them. I didn't like it a bit that she'd ride on his back. I watched her disappear into the night as the tingling heat overwhelmed me. It was unbearable. I collapsed into my human form on the ground, my heart throbbing. Make it stop. Make it stop. But I knew it wouldn't stop. My wolf was clawing and pacing in my head. He wanted it to happen. Take her as yours, he snarled. Never! I clawed at the ground, but as the heat became overpowering, I knew there was nothing I could do. As I fainted, I resigned myself to the fact. I had just mated to a worthless, puny human.
Download Galatea to get access to hundreds of romance books and audiobooks. Link in the description. Penny. Chapter 3. What an arrogant bastard, I thought while tightly gripping my brother's thick, silky fur. But his wolf was so beautiful, the most beautiful I've ever seen. I sighed, contemplating. He truly was. His wolf's shade of gray had been dark in the moonlight, but I knew it was a dark gray, almost black, with mixed shades of white and black without ever being entirely one or the other. Really interesting to me. I found myself wondering again what he looked like underneath all that fur. I'd never actually seen the king in human form. I bet he was big and muscular. I bet he had the perfect treasure trail. And I bet he had the perfect— I felt myself going pink. Thank you. I thought I was your favorite, Jake said, getting me out of my reverie. I chuckled before stroking him. You'll always be my favorite. You're my brother. Get me far away from that prick. Yes, ma'am, he chuckled. He ran to our house and he let me down before shifting. I was used to seeing my brother naked, so I didn't even mind anymore. He was invisible as a man to me. I'd always considered him my brother. We entered the house and I turned to him, concerned for him suddenly, remembering that he'd left the party to help me. Dad wouldn't like it. and maybe the king would pick on him too. It certainly looked to me like he was the type to bully my brother because he hadn't respected protocol or something. "Won't Dad be mad at you for not going back to the party?" I asked anxiously. "Nah, I'd rather stay with you anyway. The other wolves are all fawning over the royals," he said, dismissing my question. "Aw, the females don't care about you, so you run to your sister?" I teased. He blushed, and I burst out laughing. I hugged him tightly because I was thankful he'd stay with me. I was lucky to have a brother like him. He'd always make sure that I was okay. He'd really been a mother hen to me since we were kids. Obviously, because werewolves were so strong as a human, I could get hurt pretty easily. No fast healing for me, sadly. "First, to the shower. I have to clean the places where that moron touched me," I said cheerfully. "He's our king, you know," Jake chuckled. "What kind of king treats his subjects that way? I know I'm not technically one of you, but—" Jacob put his large hand on my shoulder, and he was serious all of a sudden as he looked into my eyes. "You are one of us, Penny. Never doubt that." I smiled at him and kissed his cheek. He was the best. I was really lucky to have him as a brother. I could never say that enough. "Thanks, but I'm still going first." He chuckled and cursed before releasing me. I climbed the stairs to my bedroom and the shared bathroom. It was painted in blue with white tiles, and I'd actually painted wolves on the white tiles on the wall. I undressed before letting the water run. I made a mental note of what had happened earlier while I was under the water. I'd survived my encounter with the Lichen King. He was so beautiful. I could remember every detail vividly. I needed to draw it. That was usually my answer for everything that bothered me. Drawing was cathartic, and I knew that it would help me sort out my feelings since I was so torn about him. He was a huge moron, but there seemed to be more to it. I knew how much the wolves loved and respected him. Plus, it had felt good when he'd touched me. I'd only seen him for a few minutes, and I already had mixed feelings about him. I made quick but thorough work under the shower, then put on my pajamas and went to my room. I sat at my window and gazed at the moon before I started drawing the Lichen's marvelous wolf. Yeah, he was as beautiful as he was an ass, so definitely a good subject for my art. I drew until late and I decided to go to bed. I could hear my brother snoring in the room next door. I chuckled and dove into my bed. I dreamed that night. I dreamed of the beautiful Lichen King, and he was a lot nicer to me in a weird romantic kind of way that let me know it was a dream for sure. I woke up early because it was duty day today. I had to help the wolves to do the laundry. I didn't mind the work. I loved it, actually, because I got to listen to music and chat with my friends. It was always pleasant to work together for the pack. I left my room and saw through the gap in my brother's door that he was still sleeping soundly. He was always such a mess. I entered the room and put the sheet back on him before exiting his room. As future alpha, his duties were other than doing laundry or cleaning the floors of the pack house so he could sleep in on duty day. I grabbed fruit in the kitchen downstairs and said a small prayer that I wouldn't see the king before going to the pack house's laundry room. I didn't want to ruin my morning by seeing his scowl or hearing his rude words. Everyone greeted me on the way to the pack house, and I waved back while eating my fruit. As I neared the pack house, I saw that Kyle was waiting for me at the entrance, and he waved at me as soon as he spotted me. His dirty blonde hair was shining in the light of the morning sun. He looked good. He wasn't as muscular as my brother, but Kyle was just an enforcer, so he didn't need to train as much as my brother. He had mischievous blue eyes, and that made him almost as popular with the ladies as my brother, except he truly didn't care about them. I'd asked if it was because he didn't like females in general, but he just shrugged and said that he wasn't interested in romance. I never understood that because my heart lived for romance. I was a 24-year-old virgin, so sue me. Finding a mate was the ultimate goal for a wolf, but he didn't care. He'd always say, "I have time, Penny." It was true, but I sometimes felt like an obstacle. He never wanted me to be out of his sight, and that could ward off his potential mate. I didn't want to be the one to get in between him and his mate. That would hurt me. "Ready for a hard day's work?" I asked when we were on the same level on the porch of the pack house. He grimaced and I giggled. I knew Kyle hated duty day, but he was doing it for me. We always wanted to spend time together. It was never enough. We really were best friends. We entered the house and walked straight to the laundry room on the ground level. I put on our favorite playlist, and Britney Spears's You Drive Me Crazy sounded. The she-wolves helping us giggled as I took the iron and started dancing and singing in rhythm. I loved those moments, and they almost took my mind off the rude Lycan King. Almost. But then I thought about his rippling muscles, his snarl. A shiver ran up my spine, a shiver of fear. And of something else, too. Download Galatea to get access to hundreds of romance books and audiobooks. Link in the description.
Serious. Chapter 4. I woke up this morning after a very erotic dream involving that worm of a human. My briefs were sullied with my cum, and I remembered vividly how she'd felt. Shit. It was enough to make it hard again. I growled and went straight for the bathroom to clean up. She won't be on my mind any longer, I vowed. My wolf actually gruffed at me. He wouldn't let me forget about her. Oh no. It was a first for me to fight with him. We were always one, but not this time. Shit. It wasn't the time to be at odds with him, not with a vampire problem on our hands. Once I was freshened up after a quick shower, I exited my room. A nice smell greeted me immediately. Maple syrup and blueberries. Were they still making breakfast at this hour? If yes, I'd be lucky. I followed the scent but arrived at the laundry room instead of the kitchen. What the? There she was, moving her ass in rhythm with the music I could hear coming from the room. She was singing and dancing, and damn, I had to admit it was hot. I was worried she'd burn herself with the iron, but she was doing both things skillfully. My cock hardened right away as I saw her hips swaying. I wanted to pull those hips to me and feel them on me. I thought about my dream and shook my head to chase away the thoughts. Fuck. My wolf was also urging me to touch her. He was licking his snout, very suggestively. No! Imagine what she could do, moving her hips like that against me. Fucking stop! I snarled at him. I heard a chuckle behind me as Alpha Richard was walking to me. I turned my head to him, offering him a scowl. He was smiling, unfazed, as he gazed at his human daughter. She's a good kid. She always puts on the music while on duties. She tells me who the singer is, but I keep mixing them up between Miss Spears, Swift, and the Korean Black or something. The wolves here love her, you know. She's just a human, I mumbled grumpily. He chuckled again, and the smile he had on his face was so sweet. He really loved her like a daughter. It was undeniable. I wondered how such a good alpha would love a human girl like his own pup, and then I could only think that she'd tricked him. Yes, that was it. That was the only reason. She's so much more, he continued, interrupting my speculation. All the paintings you'll find in this pack house and in my home are her work. She was blessed with more than her abilities with our kind. She's an excellent artist. I hoped she'd be the mate of one of my wolves, so I could keep her here with us forever. I even hoped she'd be mated to Jacob, but sadly not. So you believe in the legends about the children blessed by the huntress? That they're destined for greater things? I asked. He turned to look at me seriously, and I could guess what he was about to say. I knew what he was about to say. I thought you'd believe in them more than anyone, considering your past and that you're a Lycan, my king. I knew what he was talking about. I didn't want to think about that. I once thought that it would be good for us if I mated with one of Artemis's huntresses, but she just left me when I wanted to have a more intimate relationship. She would have to leave the hunt for me if we did, and she preferred her place next to Artemis rather than stay with me for all eternity. Ungrateful bitch. I could have offered her anything, but she just wanted to stay with her goddess. That was when I first learned about humans and the huntress's mark, and it was not a pleasant memory. I turned my gaze back to the human, and she was still dancing and singing while ironing the clothes. I felt a smile creep up on my face. She looked nothing like Eva. Her chestnut hair tied in a ponytail was bouncing in rhythm, and she looked like she was having the best time of her life. My wolf was howling appreciatively. She was fine for a human worm, even I couldn't deny that. Can't deny it. I didn't know if it was my tone or the look on my face, but Alpha Richard understood immediately what was going on. Shit, get it together. She's your mate? Oh, I couldn't be happier, Your Highness. She'll be a great queen. She was born for this, after all. Did you tell her already? He asked enthusiastically. My face hardened, and I glared at him. Oh no, that would never happen. I'd never allow her to know the power she had over me. Being a mate made her the master of my soul. That was too much power for a human. No one must know, Alpha Richard, not even her, I growled lowly. Why? She'd be so happy. She's dreamed about it ever since I told both my pups about mates. Her brother used to say he'd be hers if she didn't find anyone. I growled involuntarily. I'd seen how close they were yesterday and I didn't like it, but... She's human. She'll never be fit to live among us and rule us. Over my dead body. I scowled. You know that's not true, Your Highness. The Alpha frowned. I growled again, before tearing my eyes from her, as a young male her age delivered more clothes. That brought an even lower growl from my mouth. I needed to get out of here before things got worse. I walked away to Richard's office before my wolf could act and claim her there. Richard had lent the office to me for our work on the vampires. We sat around the desk and I said, "Last night it was a vampire who attacked your daughter. They're getting more cunning by the minute. Poor Penelope. I'm glad Jacob took care of her last night. She must have been shaken." I recalled my encounter with her and chuckled. She'd seemed too fierce for that. Oh no, she wasn't fazed. She even talked back at me, I said with a smile. Huh, that's my girl. She's fearless, he said, his eyes sparkling with pride. A vampire so close, that's not good. Did you hear him say anything? Not really. The human should be able to tell you more about it, I said. I'll ask her, but maybe you should, my king, he said, eyeing me suggestively. I don't want her near me, I growled. Right, he sighed. He didn't believe me for 1 second. Shit. I sighed and looked back at the reports in front of us. The vampires were more important than this human girl, or so I kept telling myself. I needed to focus on my work if I wanted to get the fuck out of here. I couldn't stay with her so close, not with her grinding her hips like she was doing today, unless they were grinding against me. I felt the cloth of my
Penny. Chapter 5. Once we were done with the laundry, it was late in the afternoon. I decided to pack my sketching supplies and go by the lake near the pack house to draw. Kyle offered to come with me, and I accepted. We'd often go together to the lake, and I'd draw while he'd take a nap. It was all we needed to enjoy ourselves. We settled under a tree, and I continued my sketch of the Lichen King. Kyle lay next to me, and he closed his eyes while I hummed a song. Will you show it to me when it's done? He asked lazily. I blushed and thought about showing it to anyone. It would be really embarrassing. What would people think if they knew that I was drawing the king's wolf? Maybe. I shrugged. He opened one lazy blue eye to look at me. I could understand why he'd asked to see the sketch. Normally, I'd always show my work to him, but I felt shy about the drawing for now. It seemed so intimate. Really? You always show them to me, he pouted. Yes, but this one is special. I think I'll put some color in it, I said, blushing. You'll paint it? Yes, that's why I'm using watercolor paper. I see. What are you drawing? He asked. Can't tell you, I teased. Hey! I giggled as he settled back down. I was deeply engrossed in my drawing when the sun started to set. Jacob came to get us for dinner, but I frowned. The idea wasn't appealing to me at all. No way was I going to see the jerk again. One encounter was enough for me, and he'd said not to show myself to him again. I'd respect his wishes with a passion. You two go. I'll eat at home since my presence is an eyesore to his royal eyes, I said icily. Penny, my brother started. No, Jake. He was very clear that he didn't want me in his sight. I won't embarrass any of you, and I'll go home. I put all my stuff back in my bag in a hurry and walked home before he could try to make me change my mind. Jacob and Kyle knew better than to stop me when I was in this state of mind. I was usually calm until I got mad. They knew to stay out of my way when I got mad. After I heated some leftovers, I settled in my room and put my sketch on an easel. I smiled as I looked at my work. Yep, it would be better with colors. That would make it more real, and the king had such nice colors that it would be a waste not to reproduce them faithfully. Once again, I immersed myself in my work until it was late. I hadn't heard anyone come back yet, which meant that they were having a party. Good for them, I thought bitterly. I felt lonely, though. I loved to dine with everyone at the pack house. Everyone was so nice and so lively. I'd known all of them my whole life, and we were a big family. That was what I loved about being raised by werewolves. We were all so close, and they'd always accepted me as I was. I wasn't going to let that jerk of a king change my life, even if he kind of has already. I sighed at my own powerlessness. What else could I do, though? I was only human and he was king. I decided to go to bed when I heard the front door open. A few minutes later, Jacob was knocking on my door. He was carrying a piece of cake, and I smiled at him brightly as he lay next to me in bed. "How are you doing, Penny?" "Better now, thanks." He chuckled as I savored the delicious piece of red velvet cake. One of my favorites. I loved all chocolate desserts, but red velvet cake had a special place in my heart. "I mean, you can come eat with us. I won't let him bully you," my brother stated. I knew he'd try, but it was a bad idea. Plus, I could take care of myself, and I wouldn't let the king talk to me like I was insignificant again. "Thanks, Jake, but I prefer to stay clear of him. I don't want to cause trouble," I said to calm my brother down. "Father said so too, and the king actually asked about you tonight." I looked at him with the spoon in my mouth. It was shocking. Could it be? Then I frowned. He must have made sure I wasn't coming. Yes, that was certainly it. "I bet he asked if I crawled back under the rock I came from. Like a worm," I said with my best imitation of the king. Jacob gave a hearty laugh, and I couldn't help a giggle. It was well-deserved. I wished he could have heard it, and I knew he'd have scowled. I so didn't care, though. "You got the essence of the king really quickly, sis," he said, wiping the tears from his eyes. Yeah, somehow I felt like we were connected. It's stupid because what I felt must have been just his hatred, but when he answered my call, it was different, I said thoughtfully. "How so?" he asked, surprised. We often talked about my power with Jacob, so it was surprising to him that I'd mentioned how different it had been with the king. "Well, when you answer my call, or even when Kyle does, it's like I feel a familiar warmth, like holding a dear teddy bear, you know? But with the king, it felt white-hot. Good, really good, but it also hurt." Stupid, right? I bet his rage toward humans is so big it's burning him, and that's what I felt, I said finally. My heart disagreed somehow. It hurt to even think like that. What the— "Maybe. Is that why you're drawing him?" Jake asked, changing the subject. Shit. I hadn't covered my piece since I'd just finished the contours. It needed the paint now. I blushed furiously and tried to cover my face with my hands to hide my embarrassment. "I want to understand," I whispered. "Why don't you ask him?" I chortled. My brother was an angel, but he could be so blunt sometimes. "Right, so he can kill me this time." I sighed. "As if I'd let him. I'm the only one allowed to bully you. Big brother's privilege," he teased. I giggled again. I was happy to have my brother on my side. I felt less lonely with him around. "Thanks, Jake." He knew I was feeling down, so he'd done all this to cheer me up. I was so happy with him right now. I hugged him tightly, and he returned my gesture. He then left so I could dive under my blankets. I dreamed of the Lichen King again that night, and this time it was erotic. Download Galatea to get access to hundreds of romance books and audiobooks. Link in the description.